right, and welcome everyone to the Ginette Biro Podcast. I'm Ginette Biro, and thank you as always for joining me on the show to tune in and hear whatever Spirit has to share or what's going on in the world. So today I wanted to talk about the idea that healed people heal people. And this came from a post that I saw recently. Well, it's been a little bit, but I saw this post from a beautiful soul on this planet, Liz Bennett. She's a personal trainer. She's a health and wellness practitioner. She is an intuitive beauty on this planet, and she always posts these really beautiful things. Anyway, she posted this really significant image with a statement that said, "If hurt people, imagine what healed people could help heal," or something like that, or imagine what healed people could heal in others on this planet. And I had read that just before I was about to step in the shower. And if any of you guys have followed me long enough on the podcast, you'll know that in the bath or in the shower is when I get a ton of conversations from Spirit. And for sure, I stepped into the shower after seeing that beautiful post, and they just started talking to me. And we had this beautiful conversation about this idea. And the idea was that we all on planet Earth need healing in some form. And I know some people are going to hear that and be like, "No, I don't. I'm fine. I'm this, I'm that." And that's okay if that's your perspective right now. This is not to push an opinion on everybody, but it's to have something to ponder. And the reason is, some people are moving through healing because of a physically traumatic event, right? Injury, some sort of physical trauma, and they need healing. They need an emotional healing because of the physical event. Other people are going through healing because of how, say, they were brought up, or limitations that they perceived because of how they were raised. Other people are moving through healing because of relationships. Certain relationships have brought out situations that have really pulled at them to need to heal. But then there's the other healings of smaller, sometimes seemingly insignificant events that actually they really leave a mark on us. And that could be from something someone said, say when you're like 9 years old, and someone says something to you and it seems random, but it stuck with you. And it was something that it was always in the back of your mind that maybe you didn't even fully remember the totality of that experience, but it stuck with you. And there's something in there that left a mark that is waiting for you to bring it to healing, bring it to wholeness. And this is what they were getting at. They said, Earth is all about duality. We come to planet Earth and we can't help but experience duality, meaning the good and the bad, which is why nobody gets through an Earth life unscathed in some sort of way, right? Nobody moves through without some sort of mark. And so this is what they wanted to talk about. They said, when we're really willing to embrace this idea and learn the lessons to do with healing and bring it into our being and discover more, we then open up more capacity within ourselves through the wisdom gained to then help other people. Now, this is pretty cool because we can think of like how that makes sense, right? You go through something, and then when you meet somebody else who's gone through something similar, you can be an ear for them. You can have compassion because you understand from similar circumstances. And that's really important to a lot of people on this planet. That kind of healing is really significant and important. But the other thing they said we're doing right now is those that are really willing to look deeply into their healing right now are creating new templates on the planet that require less karma. And this was really big because if you guys think of it, we go back to, for the longest time, there's been conversations about karma, and we come into this planet with certain lessons we wish to learn based on either karmic pasts or karmic behaviors within this lifetime. You know, the energy that you give is the energy you get back. But what's happening is by healing the things that we brought in with us, then creates a new template of healed souls that have come back to as much wholeness as they can, which allows for higher frequency souls to come onto our planet. So not only does it heal you in your own personal lifetimes, but the healing that you do is setting a template for the souls that are coming in. Higher vibrational souls are coming in with less karmas, less need for these healings because they're already being done and not being carried over, meaning they're going to help humanity ascend even more. And this is why us focusing on the things that need to be healed is so important, because we are clearing up this lower frequency gunk that prevents some of those really higher vibrating souls to come in. But considering everything we've been pushed into in the last while, through the pandemic, through all of the different uprisings we've seen, racial inequalities that have come to the surface, hidden aspects of history that have come to the surface, you name it, so many things have been surfaced so that we can know how to change them. We can see them so that we can then heal them. And I know this was a really big saying that many in the Indigenous community were saying, now that this has been acknowledged, now we can begin to start healing. And that's what's happening. That's what's happening universally for all of us on the planet, is these things are coming up to trigger us, which is uncomfortable, but to trigger us enough to look into it and heal it. Find out, is it still relevant? If not, how can I mend it and dissipate it so it's not barking in, the background all the time? How can I take this lesson of this thing and then put it and, morph it and transmute it in a way that I can use that to help somebody else? And then we do this beautiful ripple effect of healing that moves around the planet. And that is exactly what's happening right now. So really, through all the triggers that we're moving through right now, we're creating a planet, if we're willing, of healed people who can then help other people heal. And it doesn't mean that hasn't been happening on the planet already. Absolutely it has. But we're seeing this influx right now, pushing us out of our comfort zones, but purposely, so that we can look at our triggers. Because remember, this journey on the planet is about you. This is your journey from your perspective. Everybody is journeying from their perspective, but what if we all, from our perspectives, did the things needed to heal the things that come up? Now, here's the other thing. Healing looks different for everybody. And so that's the other thing they really wanted to talk about. Kind of like meditation or tuning in or connecting to your guides looks different to everybody. There is no one right way. And same with healing. There is no one right way. There are many ways. And there are many levels that you have to dive into for your healing. Sometimes the level of healing that you need to, or you will discover you had to access, is really deep, and you didn't realize it ran that deep, and it took several times going into that same event to, go in deeper, go in deeper, go in deeper. But then it radically transforms you. Whereas other things, it's simply a key awareness of something that shifts your whole perspective and your whole body energy on something. Right? Sometimes for some people, they may feel shame. Say they embody shame. And forever they carry around that feeling of shame. And we all know that shame and judgment, that's a heavy emotional burden. Same with guilt. That's another big one. Regret, that's another one. But let's just use shame. Say somebody is walking around with shame and they can't get rid of it, they can't shake it, they can't mend it, there's nothing. But when they really dive into it, they look at that and they realize it's not actually shame. It's that I could never explain myself. I could never explain my side of the story. I could, whatever the thing is. Then they realize it's not actually shame they're carrying, it's not being heard. Because then when they can identify what it actually is, then they can focus on that piece. Well, what do you need to be heard? Oh, this and this and this. Okay, how can you make that happen? Oh, well, I can do this and this and this. And then you dismantle this whole thing that used to march around behind you all day long with a big sign saying shame or guilt or whatever your thing is. You dismantle it, and then it becomes a thing that you can mend and shifts the entire paradigm. This is the beautiful thing about healing, but the thing is we don't know what it's going to be until we go in. And I know anytime that I've ever done any healing for myself, either individually or with a practitioner, it has always surprised me what came up. Because oftentimes when we get stuck in a loop of something and we can't mend it, we're not probably going to be able to mend it on our own because we are manifesting the same loop because we're looking at it from one perspective. But that's why sometimes having somebody else's perspective to shine a light on what you are maneuvering helps you see it differently, which can then give you that aha moment. And those aha moments can sometimes release years, decades worth of trauma, grief, burdens on people. And then they have this renewed sense of peace and this open-hearted energy that really brings them back to life. And that is the desire of the soul, is to come back to that wholeness, not being fractured under the weight of these different perspectives. That's healing. And that's something we all have to move through in some form or another. But the thing is when we keep running from healing, whatever the label is that needs to be healed, like if we use shame again, if we keep running, shame gets bigger and the sign gets bigger and the embodiment is bigger and burlier and menacing and scarier and scarier and scarier, which makes it harder to then want to stop and turn around and go into. But the key is going into it, because going into it gives us absolute freedom. That's where we can find peace. And it's at that point that we can really start to truly help a lot more people, because first of all, our frequency changed, which then changes the frequency of our ripples, which then inadvertently can inspire others to change it, even sometimes without having conversations. They just feel your energy. And now the other thing I want to say too, that I chatted with my guides about with healing, is that when they say healed people can heal people, it doesn't mean you have to be perfectly healed. It doesn't mean you have to have everything figured out and everything is good now, because that would not be realistic in 3D life. Because again, we live in duality and things will happen. Things will continue to happen. But as you heal, you'll be able to view them from different perspectives, which usually will decrease the wounding as they happen. Some that may have wounded you way back in the day, like a deep, deep hurt. If something similar happened again, you may be able to be like, you know what? That's not for me. That stung a little bit, but I'm going to do my things, whether it's talking to a counselor, talking to a friend, meditation, sacred breath, journaling, whatever the things are you do to deal with it, your tools. You use your tools and you realize you were able to move through it and transmute it much faster. And so when we are in those, when we're willing to experience that, we can help other people. So you don't have to be completely healed. You'll probably never be completely healed, period. Nothing bad ever going to happen again. But you can take what you know at this point and help others in any way that you can. And then you can also become very observant of your own triggers that come up and see what those are still wanting to tell you about you. And then this is when it gets really, I'm going to say fun, cautiously fun, because I'm saying that from a soul's perspective. Let's say, okay, I will speak on that soul's perspective. From a soul's perspective, that's where it gets fun, because when we're willing to look at our triggers, we can learn about ourselves from a greater perspective much faster. And we can actually get a lot of ascending or awakening or evolving done in one lifetime when we're willing to look at the triggers. If we're like, oh, that's weird, that totally triggered me. And instead of being like, yeah, that triggered me because da-da-da-da-da, you can be like, oh, that triggered me. What is that trying to tell me? So the more that we're willing to look at it that way, the more we can actually gain, the more we can harvest from our experience, and the faster we evolve. So I'm saying from a soul perspective, that's where it gets fun. From a human perspective, though, in the beginning, that can sometimes be really overwhelming, is to recognize a trigger and be like, oh gosh, another trigger, oh, another trigger, another trigger. But what I've learned for myself, and also in conversations with other people, is the more you get willing to look at triggers, the smaller they become. Because again, they're not the feeling of fear in a trigger that then runs around behind us with a big sign of whatever the label is, saying, you're bad because of this, nah, 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 nah. Instead, we're like, oh, trigger, what did you want to say? And then it shrinks down right away. And then the trigger actually becomes this little part of you that's like, oh, well, actually, what I wanted to say is that thing that person did triggered me because it reminded me of when I was 7 and I didn't feel included, or I didn't feel good enough, or whatever it may be. And you're like, oh, okay, let's start there. And so this is a real desire of where humanity's evolution is going. Because again, when people are willing to heal, willing to embrace a healing journey, they're then more willing to support others who are going through it, and they're less judgmental and pointing fingers. They are more tolerant and compassionate to help. That creates more space for people to change through love and compassion versus being forced into some sort of idealized change. This is what's really important. Healing allows us more space to open up to different perspectives as well. We're not so bombarded by our own energy and our own mental loops and all this kind of stuff that we have no space to hear anything different. When we make room by healing, we open up free space, blank canvas. Which, I mean, if someone comes along and is like, hey, can I color on your canvas with this idea and this, and you're like, yeah, sure, I've got room over there, no problem, do your thing, we'll talk about it, we'll see how we can blend it together. That's where the beauty comes in. And so that's the kind of stuff that Spirit really wanted to get across. And it was beautiful how Liz's post really inspired this idea. So Liz, if you're listening, thank you so much for posting that. It was just beautiful. And I think this is something too that we can really express to younger generations, children, teens, whoever's in your life that's younger than you, is talking about our feelings, finding the roots of where they've come from. Spirit's talked about going to the roots of things, because then we change the way in which we grow. And that's this key choice. It comes back to choice. Once you know what the options are, then you can make a choice. If you don't know what the options are, then it's hard to make a choice. So it's beautiful if we're willing to look into ourselves. We change ourselves, and then we begin to change the world around us. It's a simple spiritual concept, complex concept in society. But I hope that kind of helps you guys ponder your own healing, also ponder the healing of others in your lives, and how you can create space for it, and just listen to people's stories and their why. And then if they're willing, maybe point them into the direction that somebody could help them, or if you can do it. We all have the ability to be healers on this planet, whether we do it from an actual modality, comfort and compassion, words of wisdom, or lending an ear with focused attention. We are all healers. That's why we came to planet Earth. That's why we came to experience duality. So I hope that helps you guys move through whatever is to come this fall. Dive into your healing, see what's there, see it as a gift when something clicks and makes sense, and feel that freedom when it opens up for you. Revel in that, because you created that space by going into it. You did it. And that's a beautiful thing. So I'll leave you guys with that. Now for everything else, check out avalonspirit.com. We've got a lot of stuff on there. Cosmic Consciousness Circle is one. If you guys are wanting to dive into some really interesting cosmic spiritual insights, woo stuff, from I don't know, how to understand signs and symbols, to different light beings in the universe, to how parallel lives fit, all that kind of stuff. Once a month, I dive into that like crazy level spirit stuff, and we talk about it. And it's a lot of fun. It truly is. So if you're interested, check that out. We also have Avalon Spirit Club that Lois leads, and she dives into different modalities of tuning into spirit and consciousness. It's really cool. You guys will like that a lot. And then if any of you are really looking at expanding your own gifts and abilities, check out my Avalon Spirit Lightworker Mentorship Circle. I know that's a mouthful, but I basically help you guys tune into your gifts and abilities, because we all have them. And the more that we understand them, the better we can learn them and use them for ourselves and for others. So I'll leave you with that. I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and I will be back next week.